Yeah. So in terms of these local governments and when they react to something or when they need to step in, how do they get the money to set up these, say vaccination programs or to function? Can they incur debt in order to do that?
So the main source of revenue is property tax. It's about 65% on average, 65% of revenues, and 35% would be independent revenues, sort of what would local governments, things that, 35 will be revenues from the central government, but this depends. So we have a group of about 20 local governments that are fully independent in terms, they don't get any money or they don't get any general grants from the central government. They might get specific grants in the sense that for a certain project or for a certain for education. So there are special transfers, but they are dedicated to a certain area, to a certain subject. But they don't get general grants. It's about 20 cities that are called independent. For the rest, in addition to those specific grants, they also get what is called a balanced grant, which the central government gives local governments in order to balance their financial means or their economic means in order to provide the services to the residents. And the balanced grants, the general grants, are granted according to the socioeconomic situation of the local government. So if you have a very poor local government that cannot raise a lot of property tax, then the general grant, the balanced grant, will be much higher. And if you have like the independent cities, which can raise, like Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv has a lot of businesses. They don't need the central government, so they have 0% of general grants. But as I said, in general, it's property tax 65% and central government funds 35%. How you decide, how local governments decide to finance a certain project, it depends on the local government. Usually the government does not the central government does not interfere. In many cases, there are the special grants. So in education, for example, if the city wants to build a new school, at least part of the budget will be from the central government, because this is how it goes. This is like the city is in charge of the building, and the central government is in charge of the finance of the building. But with respect to things that are not covered in the special grants, so it's the local government's decision which type of funds to allocate in order to finance. And local governments, with the authorization of the central government, are allowed to incur debt, to take on debt.
So that's really interesting. And that, I think, goes well with, there was a question in the chat about sort of the level of financial or fiscal autonomy in government. So it sounds like there is a fair amount of autonomy there once the grant comes, or no?
No. There is a very, very limited fiscal autonomy, because the way the property tax is structured is that the central government actually decides the tax rate of the local government.
Okay.
So what's going on is in 1985, the central government, because of economic crisis in the central level, decided that it takes control over property taxes. So whatever property tax rates were in each local government was freed, and the central governments from 85 and until now, each year decides how much they want to increase the rate of the property tax, if at all. Now the law states a certain formula for the increase, but the central government can deviate from the statutory formula and authorize a different increase in rates. If a certain local government wants to increase or decrease a property tax rate for a certain type of property, let's say commercial property or factories or residential property, it has to ask a special request from the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Interior, and only if they approve the request, they can deviate from what the central government authorized. So there is really no fiscal autonomy. In the ranking, we are the last of all OECD countries in terms of fiscal autonomy.
Wow.
So, because the central government, as I said, there is a difference between the books and what happens in practice. So in practice, the central government usually, I actually researched that. So in 75% of the requests for deviation of the increase or decrease of the rate, the central government's approves. So it's if a local government really wants to deviate, it can, because the central government actually approves the vast majority of requests. But many local governments do not request. Some local governments request every year, and which means that the strong and more, I would say, savvy local governments request and have more fiscal autonomy, and more, I would say, socioeconomically weak, and those that are not very sophisticated and have no connections to the central governments usually do not request any change in the uniform rate of increase of, so they don't have any fiscal autonomy.
Wow. So really the key is to ask. Ask and you shall receive.
Yeah, but less than about 40% of local governments each year request, and most of those 40% are repeat players. Those request every year.
Yeah. So we had another question in the chat about, are local governments required to meet minimum standards in the services that they provide? Are there any sort of impositions on that side of things from the central government?
No. There is what I said, the balanced grant that is kind of calculated according to the basket of goods and services locality are supposed to deliver to the resident, but there is no uniform basket that every local government has to provide. There is nothing like that.
Okay. And those balanced grants that come in to kind of fill in the gaps, are they also reassessed yearly, like the property taxes, or how does that change, if at all?
There is the kind of formula to structure the balance grants, but there is also within the formula, there is discretion for the Minister of Interior, and there is a lot of criticism about the way the balanced grants are distributed. So many would say, or there are many research and scholars that argue that Arab local governments do not get their fair share of balanced grants. So let's say a weak Arab local government will get much more than Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv gets zero, and a weak Arab local government gets a lot, maybe 60 or 70% of its budget will be a balanced grant. But if you compare the balanced grants of a Jewish local government with the same characteristics as an Arab local government, some people say that there is discrimination against Arab local governments and in favor of maybe Jewish local governments in the occupied territories. I didn't research that myself, but I know there is a lot of research about that, and there are many claims.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So moving now to tackle, actually, before we move to talk about financial distress of local governments, I did want to just ask one more thing about sort of the structure and the regulation of these local governments, and particularly because you mentioned the regional councils, right? There's like the villages and the regional council, and then there's the central government. So for those villages or those rural areas, what's the relationship there? Because they've got sort of two levels of higher government.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right. And the relationship is very complicated. The central government deals with the regional council, and grants will be given to the regional council, and authority is given to the regional council. And within the regional council and the villages, there is a different type of relationship. So some regional councils will give a lot of authority to the villages themselves. And some regional councils are very central. There is no law that mandates the relationship between the regional council and the villages. It depends on the decision of the regional council. And different regional councils have different decisions on this relationship between them and the villages.
Oh, wow. So it really depends. It really depends on where you are. It really varies.
Exactly. And in some ways it's good, in some ways it's bad, because it may be good to hand the authority to the regional council, because the regional council has the knowledge of the competence of the villages, and perhaps there is also a different competence of different villages within the regional council. So, like having a one type of relationship between the regional council and the villages may not be very wise.
Right.